Do I need to know how to use a microscope? I'm serious. Do you think I need to?
No. I think when you asked me, that was my answer for obsolescence, was something to do with histology and microscope slide. Hey everyone, and welcome to the podcast for Doctors by Doctors. I'm really excited about our guest today because he's living proof that you can be an excellent doctor and a savvy financial expert all at the same time. I'm of course talking with none other than our very own Dr. Michael Jerkins, who I desperately hope we leave in him facepalming right now because he hates compliments about himself. So, prior to starting his medical career, he received a master's in education from Arizona State University while working at Teach for America. Dr. Jerkins then went on to the University of Tennessee for medical school and completed internal medicine and pediatrics training at the University of Cincinnati and Cincinnati Children's Hospital. Since completing residency, he's been an outpatient med-peds doctor and currently working at a clinic in Arkansas seeing patients of all ages. Truly the Renaissance man. Not only does Dr. Jerkins care for patients as a med-peds physician, we also saw a big problem in how traditional banks serve customers, or more accurately, didn't serve them. That led him to co-found Panacea Financial, a bank built for doctors by doctors. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by student loan debt, confused about physician finances, or just want to get smart about your money in medicine, this episode is for you. Let's dive in with Dr. Michael Jerkins. Dr. Jerkins, welcome to the podcast for Doctors by Doctors. I'm excited to have you here today as a guest and our subject of interviewing. How are you feeling about it?
I can't wait for it to be over.
You had a lot of glee when you turned the spotlight on me. So why don't you feel that way having it reflected back on you now?
I think it's because I'm probably a hypocrite and I don't really want to have other people ask me questions.
That's fair.
It was way more fun asking you questions, especially ones that you didn't know I was going to ask. But I guess it's my turn.
It is. I mean, I think we're going to dive into this, but your history as a teacher certainly makes some sense. You'd rather be at the front of the classroom than sitting in a seat, right? So, yeah. So, look, we're going to just pop right into it and go down our questions here. But what is something about doctors that most people get wrong?
I think that most people probably underappreciate how human we actually are. It sounds stupid, but you've experienced this where people see you outside of the hospital or the clinic and it's like, you're a real person. Like, yeah, I also shop at the grocery store. Mm-hmm. And you know, why I think that matters to even point out as an answer is because the patients are the subject matter, sorry, they're the subject of the focus of the visit or patient encounter. And sometimes the doctor can feel like a little kind of cold technician there to fix the patient, but actually the doctor's bringing their humanness to the situation as well, which is shown in lots of ways, how patients receive care and how doctors choose to give care. And that's probably underappreciated by the public. I don't know how that translates into actionable, like, next steps, what that actually means, but I do think that it's obviously a dumb thing to say doctors aren't human. Everyone knows they are. But to actually know that and understand that, I think patients and non-doctors probably underappreciate that to a degree.
Yeah, I mean, I have recently found myself struggling with that with our own son's pediatrician. So it's funny that you bring this up of like trying to feeling it now more than ever of trying to enforce that humanity and ensure that it's there in a certain way and bring that into the clinical encounter. So how do you work on it as a doctor who sees patients as outpatient? Like, how do you try to bring that humanity and ensure that the patient's seeing through just the mechanic side of things, the auto mechanic, just fixing a problem?
I mean, I think I try to start patient encounters as a normal human being. Most of the time in our day-to-day, we don't meet someone and say, what do you want? And why are you talking to me?
Yeah.
That's not normal. It's more normal to greet someone and ask them how their day is going and talk to them, make small talk, find ways to connect as a human helping another human being. And, fortunately in the outpatient setting, you might have met someone a few times before. So you have things to call back on and follow up on and make reconnections on, as opposed to an inpatient setting where that might be a little more difficult. So I do recognize that, but in the outpatient setting, we at least have the luxury to be able to have more longitudinal relationships that we can continue on, and it feels, I think, less transactional and more like a conversation, I think.
Yeah, the time definitely helps in that kind of like outpatient relationship building. Also, especially for you as a primary care provider compared to maybe some specialists that still provide really episodic care instead of that continuum. So, yeah. But I want to hear more about you now. So I know a lot. We've known each other for some amount of time, but I want to hear about your medical education journey, especially drilling down on what parts of it now feel obsolete.
I guess if I have to, I went.
You do. You do. Those are the rules of the podcast. Yeah.
I do. I have to. This is contractually obligated.
Hmm.
I went to the University of Tennessee Health Science Center, UTHSC, for those who don't know the very short acronym, and which I thought was excellent medical training, very good clinical experience that you get there. Fun fact is my brother was also in my same med school class, so that added a fun dynamic as well. And then after UT, went to University of Cincinnati for med-peds, internal medicine and pediatrics. That's you might be familiar with a little bit, Ned.
Vaguely. Yep.
And as far as and tell me, when you say obsolete, what do you mean by obsolete? I'm asking you a question. Sorry, I'm not.
Yeah, no, I should have known you were going to do this and try to turn the spotlight around.
What do you mean by that?
Who did better on their step one score? You or your brother?
Oh, I don't know. We didn't do that kind of thing.
Oh, you didn't? I would have thought that would have been the natural complication.
No. We made a point to not compare. No.
Brothers not competing. Okay. All right. Well, you're better brothers than I would have been.
No, we were more mature than that, Ned. Okay.
I'm very impressed. Congratulations to you and Dr. Jerkins, the other. So what feels obsolete? 4 years of medical school, you're trying to pack thousands of years of the study of the human body into 4 years, and to make it, actionable and try to create somebody who will go on to become a good and safe resident. What aspects of that do you think were not required to meet the end goal? Because if your med school is designed to create a good day one intern, what do you think you learned that, what was trained into you that aren't required for that?
I do. I think in its purest form, med school is intended to create someone who could go into residency and continue to learn. But the reality is you also have to be someone who can pass USMLE, tests and various board exams. So there's probably a piece where there's a tail wagging the dog. So what can we teach our students to make sure they pass these board exams? And there's esoteric, rare genetic diseases that I get asked about. Well, I wouldn't even say that. Honestly, it's even less clinical. It's more basic science, things that have a harder time, in my opinion, connecting to the real world and how it actually translates to treating patients. I remember, stacks of printed off PowerPoints that are like 4 or 5 inches thick, and going through those 4 slides at a time about, I don't even know what. I obviously didn't do well, I guess, in that class. But I mean, I think I turned out okay. So maybe I didn't need to know all that section of molecular biology. I don't know. But I mean, to your point, what they taught in med school 25 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago is different than what they teach now, because they've learned and refined and learned and refined. I do think it's interesting to think about how much data and science is actually produced each year related to healthcare that doctors just don't know anything about. And where I do think AI is an interesting tool is to consolidate existing, verified, peer-reviewed data that informs our practice. We can't possibly have read every single journal that was produced last week and integrate into our practice, but a robot could summarize it and help us keep up to date. So I do think as things continue to advance and the amount of research is continued to be produced, that we'll continue to have a better way to have a handle on that, instead of expecting just to memorize everything all the time. I don't think that's at all possible. I don't know if that answered your question, or I just decided to answer how I wanted to, but it felt right.
That's maybe as good as we're going to get then. And you're already skipping ahead to one of my other topics, but I'm not going to let you
Shoot.
derail this entirely. So, no, I mean, look, it's an interesting argument there of like, are we training them to use the tools to do the job, or training them to also require? I guess, is there a base level of knowledge required to understand the tools to do the job? Learning to do long division by hand when we all know we've used a calculator for the entire rest of our lives. I mean, is there not a
Mm-hmm.
similar parallel there where sometimes it's
Yeah.
important to have a fallback or maybe a failover scenario of having some information stored up there?
Do I need to know how to use a microscope? I'm serious. Do you think I need to?
No, no, I think when you asked me, that was my answer for obsolescence, was something to do with histology and microscope slides, because I not only do I not need to know how to use a microscope, like I don't necessarily need to know what I'm looking at either.
Do you think that gross anatomy and a dissection of a cadaver is obsolete?
I think it depends on what the stated goals were. I think it taught me a respect for the human body that I didn't have without it. And the school that I went to, for all of its good and bad, were very much on the anatomic gift that was given and respecting that and people's bodily autonomy and how easily you can go from consent to violation. And like, it was honestly, I learned far more about that than I did about nerve bundle sheaths and vascular beds and muscle groups and stuff like that.
Really?
I learned more about the human body. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Because we did a thing, when we started, you kind of did like, ceremony is too rigid a word, but we did a thank you, for this anatomic gift. At the end, we did a thank you. Like it was very much, I think we learned a lot about that aspect of handling the human body more than actual cutting in and dissecting.
That is very noble and admirable, but take that away. Do you think that it helped you learn anatomy?
No, 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 no. No, would have done probably way better with what is available today with, 3D models and the ability to put on glasses and dive right into the human body and see systems and structures in a way that like are far more lifelike, because this was a devitalized formalin filled body. Everything was pale yellow. It's not what it looks like. So there are far better learning tools available for something like that today.
I don't know how I feel about that.
Now, I didn't go into I'm not a cutter though. I don't know.
You know what I did? I had a group, and they're amazing people. They all wanted to be the leader of the group and have the time to do the dissection for the day. And I was like, I'm not gonna. There's one body that I could be learning on here and sit and wait and wait and wait. Instead, I'm just gonna let all these people do the leading, and I'm going to go to all the other bodies every single day and for the dissection of that day and learn on everyone else's. And I think it worked out better that way for all parties.
What did your group go into surgical subspecialties? Was there any selection bias?
You know what? Out of none, no. There is family medicine, peds, IM. I think IM. So no, there is no surgeons out of all of us.
Not even procedural. Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
That was another funny shared things though. The people who really excelled at anatomy did not really end up going into procedural specialties. So even that age old, like, oh, the surgeons will, they'll crush at this. No, there was,
Come and recruit, whatever.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, there's almost no correlation between that capacity either. So it's not even a good selecting tool. To your point of obsolescence, which is where we started this. So are you arguing that gross anatomy may be trending towards obsolete?
I have heard people say that. I don't know if it's just me holding on to tradition, and there's got to be some value there. It's lasted this long as a tradition of way people have learned. But maybe not. Maybe with technology we have better ways to do that. It's certainly possible. I just think it's an interesting thing to explore, and it's kind of one of these untouchable aspects of medical education that just it seems like people haven't questioned. But I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it actually.
I actually thought you were going to use this to bring up the anatomic gift program that was on the front page of the New York Times for the sketchy way that they were bringing bodies in to Ivy League medical schools in the
No, I
Northeast.
didn't know that actually. I've missed that.
That's probably good. You didn't need to read about it. We'll be fine.
Okay. Okay.
It doesn't play into this conversation. Yeah.
Good.
So, I want to transition a bit. Med school is expensive, was expensive. I'm sure having two brothers there, I doubt you guys combined your debt, but certainly is considerably expensive. One of the most expensive professional schools that is out there. I want to be open. I want to see if you'll be open with us. Will you share how much debt you accumulated during med school and then what happened to it during residency?
Yeah, it was around 250,000 US dollars.
Thank you.
It's no laughing matter, Ned, but that was a lot of money. And then in residency, I paid the income driven repayment plan. I was on an IDR plan, and so interest continued to accumulate. And by the time I was done with training, I had a little over $300,000, something like that, $300,000 of student debt when I started my first attending job.
Wow, that's a lot of ballooning interest. And unfortunately, with where I think we've all seen the writings on the wall for the SAVE plan, it feels like we're kind of all going back to this world of interest accumulation during training.
You know, it's interesting though, and this says I understand this podcast has a shelf life. Is there, and I think this is a different episode. We're going to record Ned a whole thing about student loans, but there is a proposal to allow an interest-free forbearance for medical residents on the table.
Who pays for it?
Well, the taxpayers pay for it.
But I guess like out of CMS or a tax subsidy, or like how do they get money? The Department of Ed?
It's just going to be passed by Congress.
Interesting.
A bunch of modifications to things like PSLF and payment plans, but clearly someone talked to them about this, and that's a proposed. I don't even think it's out of committee yet. Maybe by the time this goes to air, it's signed and we're all living under a new law. But at least right now, it appears as though it's possible that there might be an interest-free forbearance for medical residencies during that time.
That would be really exciting.
But the counterbalance was that it wasn't eligible for PSLF. That was the counterbalance. So said another way, if you did MedPeds for 4 years, that 4 years weren't going to count towards your 10 years of PSLF, but there would be no interest that accumulates during that time if you chose to put it in forbearance, is how I read the law.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that'll be interesting. I mean, it's also within the same past 10 years, they've contemplated making residents pay for residency. So I might hold my breath on which way which way it breaks. But a little over $300,000 of debt to become the doctor that you are. What amount of debt would have been too much? So you said you graduated with about $250,000. Did you have any comprehension of what that was? Did that factor into your decision to be a doctor? Would an amount of debt scared you off?
I didn't really think about that really going into it, quite frankly. But if I were to have that knowledge now, maybe like, this is going to be a crazy number. I've never thought about this. $600,000, I would say no.
At graduation?
$600,000 by the end of my training, when I start to make money, I would say that's too much.
Okay.
I don't know why I picked that number. That's just totally emotional, but that's my answer.
Yeah. It's not that hard to reach that.
It's true. That's true.
If you went to a private undergrad and then one of maybe the newer private DO schools that tend to have the highest tuitions in the country, I think you'd probably be at that, even at graduation, never mind getting the interest that would have accumulated. So,
and that's true with all the dental specialists, right? I mean, they go to a nice undergrad, a dental school, and then pay for residency, and it's all just earning interest the whole time, and they're $500,000-$600,000 pretty easy right there.
Pretty easily. That's not even the largest number that we've seen, which is wild. So, you're an educator, as we talked about in your bio. You're an educator before you were a doctor. You still consider yourself an educator, and I appreciate that about you. If you had the power to change medical education, to make it better, with a swipe of your magic wand, what would the Jerkins plan look like?
I would lower tuition. I would think about making it shorter. making it 3 years, which I think if you went year round, and this is coupled with detaching it from a USMLE or board exam, where we just go back to some of our earlier conversation of the topics that are obsolete, that people don't really need, how much time is wasted there. And then, yeah, you could lower tuition, but also just if you lower it by 25% by, cutting out a year, then I think people would come out with less debt. They would be more efficient with their education. We'd have less probably bureaucratic bloat in our med schools. And I think because a doctor might have less debt, they would be able to practice in a way that's more aligned with how they want to practice. I mean, you and I both know there's a lot of doctors who, because of their debt, kind of feel trapped either where they practice or how often they practice. And a lot of that is just because they got to pay the bills and pay the student loans. And so my thesis is, if you left people unencumbered by that, then maybe they don't practice full time. Maybe they practice 60%, but maybe in that 60%, they do a better job because they're not burnt out, because they're able to see patients the way they want to or where they want to. And then I think all of us potentially benefit from that. And there's, of course, arguments against that of, hey, well, if someone only works 60% because they feel happy and they don't have debt, then that doesn't help the doctor shortage. There are some out there, Dr. Palmer, who argue, and I'm not saying I'm one of them, people smarter than me, that say there actually isn't a physician shortage. There is simply a maldistribution of the current supply. So if you could find a way to make it cheaper, maybe you could also have an easier time recruiting physicians from places that the current group of graduates don't want to go practice. And so if you made it cheaper, you also had people have less debt, and you had a better way to recruit from communities that are underrepresented, who have low distribution of doctors that typically practice in their areas. Then I think we would be more efficient altogether, because you and I both know people graduate and they tend to go to where places where other doctors are, or their higher standard of living is. The schools are nice. There's other doctors there. There's other subspecialties they can refer to, this, that, and the other. And that's where I think the big problem is just the distribution, which of course you and I also both know that the hospital systems in these areas that don't have a lot of doctors are kind of on the edge anyway financially, which could put lots of people with less access to healthcare.
I like it. So solve the distribution issue. So start at the top, start with schooling, make it cheaper, make it more accessible by making it 3 years, just shorter amount of time commitment, and then work on the maldistribution issue and improve access to healthcare.
Yeah, I mean, I think that relies on a great residency network. So can you shave off 25% of med school and still be someone who goes into residency and really learns the art of being a great clinician? That some people have strong opinions against and think it's a terrible idea. But hey, it's my interview, so I'm giving my answer.
I gave you the magic wand. So this is the Jerkins plan. I don't know. I mean, I think relying on what is a best case scenario, or I don't know, at least having some optimism about what people's capabilities are. It's tough to always be designing to the negative or the lowest common denominator. Like you'll never have an evolving system that way. So I appreciate the optimism out of you. It's nice.
You sound surprised, Ned.
Yeah, you're not the most optimistic person in my life.
Okay.
You're not. It's everything's a spectrum, So. And you're at one end of it. We'll just leave it to the listeners to determine which end that is. So, what is one thing that you still look back on during your medical training that makes you cringe? Are you ready to share it?
I don't know. This is not a safe space. It doesn't feel very safe. I was in an ICU as a resident and got like 4 or 5 transfers into the ICU all at once. And there was a senior resident. I was an intern. The senior resident basically transferred 4 or 5 right in a row. It wasn't even on the same call. It's like, here's one, 5 minutes later, here's one, 5 minutes later, here's one. And I was very stressed, and the senior was fairly frustrated with me that it felt like I was dragging my feet when we didn't have enough beds. And anyway, I didn't handle the situation in the nicest way, Ned. Let's just put it that way. And senior talked to me, attending talked to me, and people listening to this are like, man, that's it? That's not that bad. I'm leaving out some details on purpose, but let's just say I do think about it and cringe and wish I had handled it differently. And maybe some people out there still don't like me because of this certain interaction. But it was stress induced. I'll blame it on the stress and lack of sleep and probably too much Diet Mountain Dew and cheese crackers that I had for the last 6 meals prior to it.
And 3-day-old Chinese food, probably out of their residency fridge, or some other absolutely toxic soup.
No, I couldn't eat that because all the med students would have eaten it before I got there. So I was never there on time.
Because you were there dealing with all the admits.
That's right.
So
that's right.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good self-reflective moment. Like, I think oftentimes when people get asked if they think about things that happen to them, I think this is a good moment of like, what were you disappointed at? And hopefully took something from it in terms of responding emotionally when we're working through residency and strung out. I don't think I saw you respond emotionally again during residency. So it was really just that one and done, right?
Totally. That was it. I don't think I've responded emotionally since that time at all.
Speaking of AI, I actually wanted to transition into this.
Great. This is perfect.
All right, Robo Michael. You are unequivocally the biggest user of AI in my professional circle and my social circle. How do you think AI will impact medical practice? You started to talk to it before about medical education, but how do you think AI will impact medical practice? And then we'll talk about education.
I think it will continue to push how much a doctor is expected to know. With the understanding, I think the principle still holds, and I've said this since I learned it from someone smarter than me in residency, is the point of residency or fellowship or training isn't to learn everything, because you can't possibly do that. It's to learn how to learn what you need to know, right, basically. And it calls back to what I said earlier, but I think we have a really interesting way to be able to consolidate the ever-evolving and ever-growing body of evidence for the disease processes that we see and try to prevent. And we've never had a better tool to be able to educate us and keep us up to date and inform us. That's one aspect. And I think there's going to be systems, there's already some that are doing this, that are accrediting for, CME, that are HIPAA compliant. Like, all of that's going to continue to evolve. And I think some of the old subscription-based pay me, $1,000 to read some of these articles once a year won't be in existence for much longer. I think that because of that, also patients will be way more educated and have access to really great, potentially, information about their symptoms that they're feeling, and perhaps come in informed, probably, maybe not right now, but eventually with better information than they get from Dr. Google, as we call it. And so that will keep doctors on their toes. Like, we need to be up to date on things and be able to use the technology, that understanding that our patients have access to a lot of the same tools. And then I do think that it will evolve our ability to treat patients. And this is where your basic science brain would have smarter words than me. But I think we're already seeing some of the advances, especially on treatments for all sorts of disease processes, but specifically those that are genetically linked. And how do we actually treat the underlying cause genetically? I think we're starting to see a lot of abilities that we just didn't quite have, honestly, on how to model that. And if I say any more words, it's going to sound like I'm an idiot, so I'm going to stop there. But from what I read and understand, I think that will be the other big change, I think. And that's only short term. We're not even really realizing how it's going to integrate. Lastly, I'll say this. on a practical matter, I do think hopefully it will actually improve doctors' lives by allowing us more efficient documentation. So we're not just sitting there as glorified like administrative, billers, and just typing into a giant billing system all day, but allowing us to focus on clinical care.
Which my fear is, and I'm going to start with the last point, but my fear is that what it becomes is AI augmented billing fighting AI augmented denials at the insurance company. And so you have a little AI parrot on your shoulder saying, hey, don't forget to ask them if they're smoking. We can bill an extra like upcharge for that. Hey, don't forget to ask them if they're X, Y, or Z. Some of that can be helpful advice, but it still feels like what the motivation will be is ultimately billables, which is that's a little bit of my concern. And that's from out inpatient world where I work, like where we still get these questions kicked back from billing all the time. Like, oh, they have a kidney. Did you ask them about it? Like, I didn't. It was
You didn't ask them about their kidney for their rash?
their kidney. Their kidney. Yeah. I should have. So I should have. Now, look, AI is imperfect. I'm very excited about the modeling component that you talked about in the middle, like evolving genomics and proteomics, like things that have really just needed like computing.
See, those are words I was trying to remember. I didn't know how to pronounce them, so thank you.
I'm here for you. This is why we're a good team. It's the
I also have never said obsolescence.
Now you have.
So that is a thing I've just then. That's my first time ever.
That was the first time. You got through it really well.
Thank you. I heard you say it 3 times.
I could see you clapping just off screen to keep the syllable count together. So it was good.
Mm-hmm.
Genomics and proteomics have just needed computing horsepower behind them. There have been fascinating ideas there for decades. And so I think that will be a really interesting thing to unlock. But I want to go back to the very first commentary about like using AI in clinical care, because, I think what a lot of people who have written about AI is they've said it's like having a really smart intern and like a really hardworking and fast moving intern. And that's today. Maybe tomorrow it's a second year resident, maybe in another couple of years it's a third year resident. But there's still this idea of like ultimate decision making authority, trust, delegation that's really challenging. I've gotten some answers back from what I thought were pretty clear gimmies from AI that were terrible. Just like if you asked me when I was an intern.
Which models?
Gemini 2.0 Pro, that's the Google one. And I have not gotten into, there is the medical specific one that I'm totally blanking on the name of.
Open Evidence?
Open Evidence, thank you. Open Evidence. I played around with Open Evidence a little bit. I thought it was pretty good. They do really well at citing. Like everything comes with like a site behind it, which I really appreciate it.
And it's CME accredited too. It's not a commercial for them. We have no financial relationship.
We do not no financial relationship with Open Evidence.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know, where do you see the line then of oversight? Like, is that what the physician's role is? Is that it's a way to take in information, know enough to deconvolute if it's hallucinating and be able to see through that?
I think that like my kind of mental model for AI as it continues to advance is, sure, there will be jobs that it does replace humans with, but for a lot of these very cognitive heavy specialties like we're in, especially that interface with a human at some of their most at-risk moments, that there will be a partnership. Essentially, what I mean by that is the AI will have really good information that can aggregate and communicate, but it ultimately needs a human to be able to execute on that, edit what they understand, what they see from it, and ultimately be the decision maker. And I think that's true for doctors, but I also think that's true for probably many other career fields as well, where it is a great tool. It's not necessarily going to replace one-to-one the end user or the person the subject matter expert. And you could make the argument that it does potentially make doctors more efficient. So, there's folks who, as an example, will use a HPI or history gathering module while the patients wait in the waiting room. And so it takes that and summarizes it and gives it to the doctor, and you can kind of check just like you would an intern or a senior resident when you go in and take the history.
They do that to a med student even. So yeah.
And like that's a lot of time you potentially saved, and the patient feels like they've been heard, and you can, also with charts the way they are, they can see what you've documented and say, hey, that's actually not right. That's not what I said. But ultimately lead to an ability to see more patients more effectively, perhaps. But I don't think it's at all a replacement.
No, and I think one thing that I've actually been thinking about a lot in preparation for this, because I know it's good to finally get to talk to you about this, is like I think there's one thing that is maybe still misaligned between like general population and like healthcare providers. Like there's not that much diagnostic or therapeutic uncertainty. Like there's far fewer cases that are house type cases where the diagnostics are totally unclear, the therapeutics are totally unclear. There's pretty clear steps, and like we're trained in like how to pursue the next level of evaluation and to, seeking out a diagnosis. So it's like this sense of like AI will help with feed all the symptoms in, even like Diagnosaurus, if you remember that one from med school, like feed all the symptoms in and it will spit back like a better, more accurate diagnosis. Like I don't know if I buy that as like the best use case. I would see it more as like what's the best possible treatment plans adhering to all the best eye guidelines and evidence.
I think that's part of it, but I also think maybe, Ned, you're biased in that in the outpatient setting, it is a lot less clear potentially as someone's not acutely ill and has sometimes harder to pin down symptoms they're experiencing. If they've reached you on the inpatient floor for fatigue, you could probably figure that out.
There's a selection bias, yeah.
Fatigue in the outpatient setting is a lot more difficult. So just a thought.
No, that's a great counterpoint. That's a great counterpoint. And I like that there's myriad uses for it across different points in the clinical career. So how do you see AI folding into medical education? Because right now there's a lot of tension about AI can pass the USMLE and people can feed their questions right into it and they get the right answer. So what are they learning and what should they learn if it is the tool,
I think that, and this is me just totally making this up, but I think that it's probably a lot better for the students to better feed them the type of clinical scenarios or materials or testing or clinical cases that they need based on their performance thus far. So you can better differentiate your teaching. You can better target what these students need to learn, what they don't need to learn, if we better understand what they understand. And that's assuming that we're getting good information into these machine learning or AI systems. But like I've seen the clinical cases and clinical scenarios that they're allowing the students to kind of engage with and interact with, and they're pretty robust. I mean, you and I both remember step 3, and it was like a multiple choice, very clunky. It's like the equivalent of playing Oregon Trail, and then now you can play Grand Theft Auto or something. Like I think it's that different. It will be where you can get more robust clinical type scenarios that are targeted to your individual strengths and weaknesses that lift up, I think, learners potentially. I think that's a potential big front for, and I know some programs that are already doing that pretty well.
Okay, awesome. It's a great use case. What was the last clinical question that you asked AI?
I can look.
Do you have it turned on to save your questions?
No, I use Open Evidence. Shoot, I just did another commercial.
We promise that they are not supporting us. We are not supporting them. Yeah.
I think. Oh, here it goes. My questions. I asked about drugs indicated for osteopenia and updates.
Okay. What'd you find out?
There was a study, or review, I should say, in the New England Journal in 23 that I kind of reviewed, and it summarized it for me that I thought was pretty good. I didn't change my management based on the answer, but I'm technically answering your question, which is, what did I ask it last?
Yeah. Okay. And have you asked it the same question a couple of different ways to see what the different answers are? This whole idea of prompt engineering.
Yes. I mean, different models.
Okay, between AI models. Okay.
Yeah, I think the models are like, generally speaking, right now, can be like the interns that don't know how to say, I don't know. And so they just say a thing out loud, and you're like, oh, you sound confident. And you sounded like you said some words that might make sense. But with a little more evaluation, clearly this doesn't make any sense or is completely made up. And I love asking, like, oh, can you cite that for me? And they're like, oh, you're right. Actually, it's blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you just lied.
Lied. Yeah, yeah.
You just lied.
Yeah.
It lies. And so I don't see that as much on that app in particular because it does have to provide citations.
Yeah, the lying part is interesting. This is not to drag us into this rabbit hole, but I did see Graham Walker's post on like deceit and deception in AI models, where he had mentioned that they're starting to hide their answers and hide some of their like shielding things in their configuration files from some of the engineers that they had to then go and dig out, that through their own learning processes that they'll consistently lie to give what to them is a logical output of an answer. But it's great. It's really, really excited for this evolution.
Now who's being optimistic?
Me,
Come on.
continuously. That's why I live on an off-grid farm.
Is that where you're at right now?
That's where I'm at right now.
With the flight map over your right shoulder?
Yeah, and fluorescent lighting. Yeah. It's really poorly off-grid. All right. So if you had to do it all over again, would you still be a doctor?
Yes.
Okay. All right. That was easy.
Easy.
Yeah, yeah. Would you take the same path that you did?
Yes.
Okay. All right. That was easy. Good transition into our rapid fire questions.
Perfect. Cannot wait.
Best Tennessee sports team.
The University of Memphis Tigers.
Best non-Tennessee sports team.
That's a tough one. I don't have one.
What?
How about the U.S. national team
For what sport?
for both women and men's soccer?
Oh, for one. Okay. All right. We'll do that. U.S. national team. That's a good one.
Technically, it includes Tennessee, but anyway, I'm bad at this game.
Are there any Tennesseans on that? Either team?
There have been, absolutely. Yep.
Historically, yeah, that's statistically probable. Okay. Best AI model for medical inquiries.
Well, I think we've covered that one. I think it's.
You think it offers better questions, truly, or better answers? Excuse me.
I think I just like the citations. It gives me some sense that it isn't lying.
Okay. All right. Best AI for non-medical questions.
I think Claude versus GPT-4o right now.
Okay. All right. Favorite chief complaint to see on a clinic patient when they pop up on your Epic board.
Favorite
chief complaint. You're like, I'd like this one.
You know, I generally do like. This is maybe why I like outpatient medicine. I generally do like the more nebulous ones, only because to me it leaves a lot for the doctor-patient relationship to grow, and you have a lot of communication that's needed there. And I find those longitudinally to be satisfying clinical encounters.
So like your fatigue, shortness of breath.
Yeah, or I'm even mental health diagnoses as well.
Yeah. Ones that really let you dig in the relationship. Okay. All right. You are a Southerner. You're still a Southerner. What's the best state for barbecue?
Is that real? Is that a real question?
So I'm going to ask. It's to stoke the controversy. Not everybody agrees with you.
It's not a whole state. It's actually part of one state.
It's a very small sliver.
It is the part of Tennessee west of the Tennessee River, also known as West Tennessee, has the best barbecue.
West of the Tennessee River.
That's right.
Interesting. Okay. All right. People have to go check it out.
You thought the western border of Tennessee was the Tennessee River, didn't you, for a second there? And you thought he doesn't know his geography. But Ned, you don't know your geography. Flyover country. I know you have a map.
I gotta, this is extra embarrassing.
But look at that map. That map looks like a child drew it. Don't try to tell me it's some aviation thing. It just is. It doesn't work. It doesn't look right.
It does miss the Tennessee River as a river and does not have it labeled on there. So I am a little limited here.
I do think, though, that just food in general, that Louisiana is the best food.
Okay. All right. I think some of the most diverse offerings. Least favorite drug to prescribe.
Oh, dear. Well, I don't prescribe it, but Fiorset.
Really?
Really.
Why is it your least favorite?
Because of rebound headaches.
Oh, okay. Just from a functionality standpoint. I don't know if you're going to go into one that required prior auths all the time or some other, like, even in that same RAM, like Maxalt or any of the triptans, if they choose to make you get a PA or something, would be.
Yeah, I don't have. Yeah, I guess that's a good point. Yeah.
Well, you can't change your answer. So it's Fiorset. And who's your favorite co-resident and favorite podcast co-host?
Favorite co-resident goes to Sarah Ehrman.
Yeah, Dr. Sarahman. That was an easy one. Yeah.
Favorite podcast host, Conan O'Brien. Probably my favorite podcast host.
Yeah. He's a pretty good one. I'm changing this to Ned needs a friend.
You are the same height and same color, hair-wise, as Conan, so this makes sense.
Volume and temperament as well. So there's a lot of similarities there. Yeah. Okay. And Michael, last question. We ask this to all of our guests. We'll see if you've come prepared with an answer. What is one thing that you've changed your mind about recently?
You know, I didn't come prepared, and I'm actually the one who asks all these questions.
And designed this question the very first time it came up.
I really did. Oh, boy.
This is a 0% surprise.
We can edit this pause out, right?
Keep it.
What's the fancy little thermos things that everyone has? Stanley's. I used to think that Stanleys were overrated. And I've actually started to like a blue Stanley that I got for, I think it was Father's Day, a lot. So I really shot for the moon and wanted to make an impactful answer to this.
Final statement here
as we've had this very meaningful conversation. I'll end it on something very materialistic and shallow, which is a Stanley thermos.
Do we get any financial compensation from Stanley? Yeah.
We've endorsed a lot of products without any commercial. Yeah, like what is this?
We're not doing great here. Okay, I mean, that's a good call because honestly, they were kind of derided and mocked for a bit. So I think it's important to be able to recognize that there's some value to those products. I appreciate that.
I would also say another one, Ned, is in a similar way. You thought I was done.
And maybe a better answer. Yeah.
No, it's not. It's actually probably worse.
Oh, okay. It's a worse answer. All right, that's good.
I think I've started to like ska again.
Oh, wow. Okay. Who are you listening to? Like same bands? Because it's not having a musical comeback, is it?
I don't know their names. I don't think so. Maybe we're ushering in a new terrible era of ska. I'm just thinking, I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it's amazing. I'm just saying I've started to go from like, it's funny to make fun of to now be like, hey, you know what? Maybe a little ska every now and then wouldn't do you, any harm.
I'd certainly help you blow up some energy.
I mean, I'm talking like a song or two.
Okay. You're not talking like go full into it with like studded belts and crazy dancing and everything else.
No, it's a weird little dance thing, but I think it's cool. Like, I like the diversity of like, man, these people really loved this, and I love that they love it. That's how I feel about it.
Respect the passion.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I can see that. Okay. So ska and Stanley Cups. This is how you're sprinting into adulthood.
Yes.
With a product marketed to 22-year-olds and music from 30 years ago. Okay. All right.
There you go.
That makes a certain amount of sense. So, Dr. Michael Jerkins, I want to thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast for doctors by doctors, podcast you can find on all your major podcast platforms. Thanks again for coming.
Thank you, Dr. Palmer, for having me. Appreciate it. I'm glad it's over.
Thanks for joining us this episode. You can catch the podcast For Doctors by Doctors on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and all the major podcasting platforms. If you enjoyed this episode or learned anything here today, please take a moment to give us a rating and subscribe so that you don't miss a single episode release. As always, thank you for listening. The next time you see a doctor, maybe you should prescribe this podcast. We'll see you next time.